Ms. Bellinger, if you'd open us, please.
Okay, we're going to say a prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for all your blessings, for my colleagues on council here with such good hearts and minds, for our city manager and all the leaders and department heads and staff in all the departments, for those who volunteer day in and day out, and for all the people of this beautiful city, the people we're here to serve. Please bless all of them and us, and particularly bless those who are suffering in any way today. Please give us wisdom tonight. We know that we're many parts and all one body, so lead us in truth and love, so that together we work toward becoming not only the oldest, but the wisest town in Texas. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you. Okay, I will call the meeting to order, and if you would stand with me and let's pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll begin with our work session and receive a report, hold a discussion, and give staff direction regarding an update from Army Curtis, AIA, on concepts for the partial renovation of City Hall first floor. Our city manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, members of the public as well. Just want to do some introductory comments, and then I'll hand the baton over to Army, and then Steve Bartlett will come in and do some concluding comments. What you're going to be hearing tonight or this afternoon from Mr. Curtis is really just a concept of some observations that we've made with our facilities to kind of give you some perspective. When you walk into this building, one of the things that you notice is that there is no lobby. There's no really entryway. There's not really a place where people can be greeted when they come into the building. Quite honestly, in my opinion, it provides some poor customer service because people, a lot of times folks come in wanting to do business with City Hall. Residents come in and they're roaming the halls. They don't necessarily know where they're going. They walk in, they read the sign, they may go to the wrong floor, they're maybe applying for a position, or they're trying to pay a water bill, or they're wanting to do business with development services, and they may end up going to the wrong floor. And so a lot of times they end up on the third floor, and we have to direct them down or walk them down to the right floor to do business. On the flip side, the same holds true from a safety perspective. People can just roam the halls aimlessly without really any checks. The current setup with the chambers, as you see today, does pose a challenge, especially during when we were during the midst of the pandemic, in the early days of the pandemic, because of social distancing. We obviously went through a process of doing remote council meetings for city council, and then we were able to do the hybrid approach. Well, some were able to come in, some were not, but even when you were all together, we had all the plexiglass, and then we had a situation where you had some council members at the top of the dais, and you had some council members at the bottom of the dais. And so it just proved kind of that clunky awkwardness for city council members when you all were conducting business. The other thing too, with the way this room and the way this floor is configured, it really gives little time or little space to conduct certain types of meetings, workshops with city council. We don't have that space here on this floor. Secondarily, there's very little room for community meetings and community gatherings, and really no areas for overflow. So one of the things that you'll see from Army is kind of give you some perspectives of some things that we would like for you all to just think about, and just concepts that we would like to show to you. And like I said, I'll hand it over to Army, and then at the end, once he's finished with his comments, Steve will wrap it up with any concluding comments, and then at that point, seeking some direction on how you want to proceed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Curtis.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Army Curtis with Curtis Architecture. Mario's done a good job kind of laying out some of the initial thoughts that went into the ideas of making these considerations. And I'd like to step into the graphic that was being done and kind of walk you through some of the ideas of what we were finding. So coming up on your screen right now is a partial floor plan of this level that council chambers is on right now, to give you a feel for where we're at. The bathrooms that you see up on the upper side and the elevator, those are all existing and in their place right now. We are not moving them as part of this work, as well as the stairwell. All of the areas outlined with red dashed lines are kind of considered to be our general public areas, or areas that are affected by what we're considering. So as you know, this is a very tight building. We're working in a box, and the box really can't be expanded. So it kind of started initially with the idea of social distancing, especially in the chamber room here, as COVID really presented a challenge in how many people could be present in the building or in the room while a meeting was going on. So some of that is being tempered here with some of the general ideas that went into this. And then also, what does it mean when you step out of the whole social distancing, kind of back to normal, so to speak, as to how the spaces could act in a full service. So the scope of work here basically entails everything from the front door here all the way back to the next set of interior stairs that tie the different levels together. And basically we're gutting all of this out, with the exception of the bathrooms, the stairway up front, the elevator, and the elevator equipment room. Everything else in this scenario would be gutted out. We would then transition. What you go through normally now is you probably go through the stairway initially during any given business hour type of scenario. But instead, that'll be an exit only for the stairway going out. And the door that's coming into the chambers right now becomes your main entry door into City Hall. And it is characterized by an entry lobby. There will be somebody stationed there to greet you, to help direct you, and to also then, the concept being that you wouldn't necessarily have to go upstairs to meet. Staff would come downstairs, and in a series of little meeting rooms here, this meeting 1, meeting 2, meeting 3, and meeting 4, these are flexible meeting areas where the interior walls can be pushed back and forth. So very flexible in terms of how the spaces can be configured, whether it's for small one-on-one type of meeting, or if you needed to open up for a little larger work session, not unlike what we're doing right now. But it's kind of the initial public face that the city presents then to visitors who have business here. The entry lobby, the little arrows that I'm showing there are all points of access through the spaces. These are all very conceptualized spaces, but they represent the potential access ways between them, including the fact that there would be a secured access from the entry lobby on into the rest of the facility. Let's see if you can see my mouse moving around. So this set of arrows right there would be a secured access that the person who's stationed in the lobby could control. It could also be with staff having swipe cards to be able to move through that doorway and come out and meet people and greet them in the entry lobby, and then either take them into those small meeting rooms, or if they needed to go to the elevator and needed to go upstairs for some reason, they could be brought through. But it's all in a controlled atmosphere. After that, there's a hallway that leads deeper into the building and ultimately to the new city council chambers room. A little explanation about what you're seeing there. The hexagons with the little red dots in them, that is a social distance type of setup that could be done. It is based on studies done by Texas A&M and how they are handling their classroom situations in a socially distanced atmosphere. In this case, we are able to get up to 28 seats in that configuration with this layout. Up at the head dais, there's that curved table there. The seats that are in circles, those are socially distanced seating arrangements on the dais, giving a 6-foot diameter circle around each person. And then the dashed chairs that you see in between would be a full layout, full potential layout. So you could have up to 9 seats at that dais under fully operating circumstances. This arrangement allows for a pass-through exiting off to the right. So down in this area here, with access ultimately to the other exit way of the building, which are that set of stairs. There's also another conference room, what's labeled conference room number 1, that has access not only off of the main hallway area, but also to the council chambers. So it could be an executive retreat, or it can be used as a different conference area during normal business hours. That might be a little bit more than what would be needed in the smaller meeting rooms. So this plan offers a lot of flexibility, I feel, ultimately. A lot of different ways of being able to interact with the public, as well as have potentially greater capacity for your council chambers as well. In a fully realized situation, this plan here can hold almost 120 people. So the little black seating arrangement that you're seeing represents that. There are still a lot of things to consider with a plan like this. We have started to look at what potential costs are associated with something like this. This is just a kind of high-level look at what it means. We're dealing with about 4,100 square feet of area in all of this discussion. That leads up to an initial construction cost of about $160,000. By the time you put some soft cost in there, which I try to incorporate because that first number is strictly construction type cost. So by the time you're going to need some furniture probably to implement into this. There'll be some technology aspects that would certainly go into this, and then the AE fees. So by the time you add up total project cost, you're looking at about $1 million project here when all said and done. Again, this is just a very conceptual type of look at kind of trying to solve a couple problems in one fell swoop, and we felt like this had a lot of potential. We did look at other options in other parts of the building, but they really didn't lend themselves, I think, in our opinion, with what this represented. So this was kind of done in conjunction with some staff members, with the city. There are ways to enhance this too. If you talk about security of the building, there are other access points, mainly down near the water department. Those could also be integrated into kind of a key card or swipe card type of situation so that you could have control of who comes in and out of the building and know when people are coming in and out of the building. So that's about all I have right now. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have or concerns or input.
Okay, well, so there's no public for any public comment, correct? So we will go on to Ms. Fisher. How about you?
I knew you were going to call on me first. I'm sorry, Mayor and rest of council for running a little bit behind today. this might not, and I didn't see him because I've just been sharing the screen. Was that Mr. Curtis who was presenting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Hi.
Hello.
I might have missed the part where, did Mario give some background information on where this is coming from and why it's being presented to us? Did I miss that?
You did. He spoke about issues from the pandemic, potential safety issues. What did I miss?
The other thing too is just the front door. There is no lobby at City Hall, so folks that come in to do business a lot of times come in. I mean, if you know where you're going, they know where they're going. But if you're new to the area or new to the building, sometimes it can be confusing for folks when there's no one to greet you and direct you and guide you to where you want to go.
Do we know when and this might have been answered too already, when the last time that there was any major construction or renovation done to council chambers?
In 2000 is what I'm hearing.
Okay.
And I think that's when the whole city hall was renovated at the same time.
Okay. Mr. Curtis, in your experience, and I know that this would depend, on a case-by-case basis on like if something goes wrong or something is in need of repair, but generally speaking, when these kinds of renovations, and when I say when, I mean like how many years elapse, when these kinds of renovations are required by the building, basically for the reason that, well, it hasn't been renovated in a really long time and it's not serving our needs, like what that time cycle is. What I'm asking basically is 20 years too short, too long, normal?
I think it depends. I mean, that's a open-ended question, and I think it depends on several factors. Like any public use building, there comes a time when certain finishes and things need to be upgraded. Things like any more energy control or energy savings with changing out of lighting systems, upgrading technology. These are all things that are kind of on a moving scale with renovation. You really haven't, you've maintained the building very well. The city has maintained the building very well. But at some point, things just start to look outdated too. And so there's a kind of a speculative look into when is the best time to look at upgrading things, right? Sometimes with the technology updating, security aspects like what we're talking here, they represent good opportunities or timing for such renovations. I think one of the keys in looking at what we're presenting here today is the fact that we're not trying to necessarily piecemeal the aspect of making city council chambers bigger. This became a bigger issue with also helping the public image of coming to do business with City Hall, and that goes into the whole front lobby aspect of it, not just expanding or enhancing city council chambers. And so to that end, what I'm proposing is that we gut it all within the space that we're dealing with. You know, we can keep the bathrooms and the elevators and that's just some kind of the high ticket item areas. We leave those alone for the most part. But we don't, what my experience has been is when we try to surgically remove and tuck back in, that's when we get in trouble. It's hard to pick and choose within a space what to renovate. So it's a lot easier, it's a lot faster, and it's usually a lot cheaper to just go to the studs and come back in and do it the way you want. You know, you're spending a lot of money here. Get what you want to a point where the city can function for the next, 15 years, say, until something else changes.
Thank you. That's helpful. Mayor Mize, that's all I have for right now. I might pop some more things in my head later, but for right now, that's what I've got.
Great. Ms. Bellinger?
Thank you very much. Great presentation. I have a couple of questions about security in other buildings in Nacogdoches. I'm trying to think about banks and SFA and, if they have, security issues, they don't have swipe cards going into the.
We do a lot of work with the school district, so NISD and other school districts. And over especially the last several years, I'd say the last 5, 6, 7 years, security has become a much more enhanced issue at hand. And the school districts have been actively upgrading campuses to that end to different levels and degrees. But they all seem to come down to having a secured entry to the point of having it be a one point of entry especially for guests, so that they can control who's on campus and especially who gets in the building. And to that end, they have issued swipe cards to staff. Those kind of systems can get as complicated or as involved as you want them to be, but down to the point of who swipes and when they swiped and how long they were there. It can be that involved. So I think that's a public entity that you might be able to compare against to at least slowing somebody down, if nothing else. It's not going to stop a determined person, but it definitely it definitely doesn't give them free reign either of a building. So the school districts especially have been an example of something like that.
Sorry, got a frog in my throat here. Do you know of any other than schools? I know we've had so many.
I know
I'm just
some of the
trying to think of
healthcare
them.
stuff we did, so this is kind of private office type of thing, but healthcare we did where the public entrance is still a public entrance and it's somewhat controlled at the lobby. So people can come in and out as they please, but other exits out or other staff entrances in are key coded or carded. So
Those are doctors' offices, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Okay.
so these are doctor's offices. In this case, they are. And again, they are using it to know who's getting access, especially after hours, because sometimes that's an issue. But it prevents Joe Public from walking into the back door of what is normally a staff entrance. They just can't do it. And so they issue swipe cards to staff.
That answered my question. I really appreciate it. I have a couple of others, but I'll wait and see if they're.
I'm going to have a couple from Mario about it after we finish with Army, so I think that'll be welcome. Mr. Bowden?
Thank you, Mayor. I often have a problem as far as cost, renovating versus building a new structure, et cetera. The security, lack of security in this building is well known. You can probably walk any week and you'll see somebody on the 3rd floor. Shouldn't be there, but they are lost. And we definitely need a security in place, not only for information location in place, but with that being said, this is a lot of funds to renovate an old building. And I mean, you still have the cost of maintaining the building, but you mentioned about energy saving issues, like could it be all LED lights and et cetera. But what would be your thoughts on renovating versus a new structure in the Nacogdoches, and with as much property as we own in Nacogdoches? And do anyone, maybe I can ask Mario later about how many square feet this building has in use?
Yeah, I don't know
I'll
what the
ask them
floor
later.
plate of this building
Yeah,
is. We could
right.
find that out, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got access to the
If I
plans
remember
of it.
correctly, it's somewhere in the 16 to 18,000 square
Six-
foot
16,
range,
That
I
probably
believe.
sounds about right.
Yeah, okay. Because I was basing that on cost
But
of
building that new becomes tremendously expensive.
Yeah,
To build
well,
in
yeah.
all the elements that we need, it's
Yeah.
not undoable.
Yeah,
Certainly.
well, I mean, we just built a new structure, 15,000 square feet, but it was like 2.3 million.
Yeah.
But it housed everybody. And I think there's probably 11 separate offices that we housed.
Right.
So,
Right.
and
I think location is a big aspect
Mm-hmm.
of that kind of consideration. Considering the kind of business that goes on, it depends if you're talking about moving City Hall as a whole, right? Or whether you're just talking about where the council meets. That's kind of a different
Exactly.
level of scope.
But also, one of the thoughts behind that is, it's been considered like opening up this area downtown. We take up a lot of, even like this evening, when city council members start, and we have businesses that still open, restaurants, we take up their parking spots and et cetera. So it's a lot of things to be considered, but to me, it's just that cost. I know it's needed, but that's extremely high cost to me. But I thanks for the presentation. It enlightening. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Well, I certainly don't have nearly as much experience renovating older structures as Mr. Curtis does. But I do have some, and just to address your concern on the cost, that amount for this amount of square footage, given the technology and security concerns that we would have, is actually, that's about, I would have guessed about $1 million or 1.1, something like that. So it's about what I would think it would be. Thank you very much for the presentation. The last year especially, to me, has highlighted, and the last few years really have highlighted how much we need a larger council chamber. The pandemic has made it extremely obvious to me. But security concerns are another thing that recent events with elected officials, I think that's something that we need to take very seriously, and something that clearly is lacking in this building. So, as far as the location here versus a new structure, I would say that there may come a point in time at which Nacogdoches outgrows this building, but given our focus on preserving historical elements and preserving the character and trying to make Nacogdoches, or downtown in specific, sort of the center, the core of Nacogdoches, I would be very much in favor of renovating this building over doing new construction somewhere else. And as far as kind of going back to the cost and so forth, once you get into potentially land acquisition, things like that, we can, I think with a plan like this, get a lot more use out of renovating this floor, which is relatively lightly used as it is now anyway, as opposed to building a new structure, which would potentially only be used for council meetings, or if we do something for the whole of City Hall, then that gets into a completely different level of project that I think, given the scope of other very expensive projects that we need to do in the near future would be, to me, sort of beyond the pale. But anyway, those are just my thoughts on it, and I appreciate your putting together what I think looks like a good use of this space as I know it. I'm not familiar with all the structural elements, but it looks like about as good a use of this space to increase our seating capacity and meeting capacity and the need for a lobby, as Mario said. I think it addresses all of those needs very well.
Thank
That's
you,
all for
sir.
me.
I think I'm a little bit more in the weeds, so tell me, so this conference room here, is that part of HR now, or, because I see the hallway as it is today, it looks like. Let me just go back to the beginning. The council chambers, I guess, is the meeting 3, 4, 2, and 1, and the entry lobby, that's where we are right here?
Yeah, so to give you an idea, present council chambers are, you're probably sitting right around here.
Okay. So that's not that hallway that cuts over.
No, it would be directly across the hall here, I think, is where
where the conference
proposed
room is?
conference room would be.
Yeah,
Because there's a return air chase. I assume that's what that is
yeah,
in
that's
there.
that little box there. So it's directly next to the bathrooms is where that conference room is.
And then the chambers would be where HR is now?
Correct. Well, and then some. I think there's
something beyond
there's that little conference type room right in the back corner. So
I remember
this
now.
includes
Yeah, I've
all
been
of
there, I
that.
think. Okay. Any other questions for Army? Yes, no?
Well, I just have a couple of comments. I actually officed in here in the 70s, by the way, downtown, up where IT is. We had all those offices up there. And we did have people who came to visit us who were unexpected. So, in fact, a few, when the state offices were here, not the city. So I firmly understand and can feel your your interest in this. But I haven't heard this as, well, let me back up for a second. These dollars that we're talking about, are they coming from any special, like, COVID fund or grant fund that are used for building? Or where would these dollars be coming from?
Can we finish with Army, and then I
Oh, yeah.
have some questions
Sorry.
for Mario also. So you
Okay, yeah.
done with Army, or?
I am. I'm
Okay.
finished with that.
No
Thank you so
problem.
much.
All
I
good.
appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, and so do we let Steve give his spiel, or? Huh?
If you'll go ahead and ask your questions of me, and then if you all feel like we're good, then let Steve wrap up.
Okay. I think Kathleen's question
Sure.
is a very good one. How does that work?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of different things. There are some monies that the city did receive from COVID, some of the CARES Act monies that were received specifically to address some of the social distancing and as far as addressing the issues related to the pandemic. So there is those monies that are available. However, if again, we're not even close to anywhere near. This is just purely conceptual. So there's a lot more to be done. So if this is something that the council does want to proceed with, we would certainly explore further. We would bring you complete options on how to fund this, whether you want to fund it with existing cash that we may have on hand, or if this is something that you want to put on as a future bond project as part of the CIP. So.
Well, just as a follow-up, I have not received any complaints about the council or the city offices or anything, though I have heard a lot about our roofs, our roads, our waters, tax incentives, helping downtown. So it's a matter of priorities, I guess. And so is there, other than security, or is there any reason this should be a higher priority than some of those other?
Not necessarily. It's really just, again, council asks us to the previous council asked us to look at CIP, and so this is just part of that process. So council's going to be seeing a lot of different presentations about a lot of different things, because we have a lot of things that we need to work on, and so this is just one of many things that will be coming to your agenda in the future.
Okay, and it's not out of any particular dollars we're gonna lose, or, okay, thank you.
Mr. Bowles, anything?
No.
Mario? Jensen? Ms. Fisher? No? I did have one, so kind of walk me through this conceptually. You would really probably only have one person in this new space at most times.
Most times.
And so what kind of person would that be? What would that, just a receptionist? Is that what you think, what you would envision?
More than likely, someone that receives phone calls. A lot of the phone calls are routed to Jan Benson in our office, and so a lot of times people will get a call from the city, and the number that comes on their caller ID, I believe, is extension 2506, or is it 2506? The last four digits, but it could be coming from the water office. It could be coming from Public Works. It could be coming from any city department, and so that person just hits redial. And so it goes to Jan, and Jan's like, well, it could have been any departments. If they didn't leave a voicemail, I don't know what to tell you, unless you may have made a phone call to the city office and you didn't get them, and they're returning your phone call. So it really puts the person at disadvantage. But really, it would be someone that would receive calls literally all day long, because Jan gets calls all day long. And then as people come in to pay a water bill, to do business with the city, to receive them and again, assist them to directing them to the right floor, or if they would like to wait, then the staff member could come and greet them and work with them in one of these small meeting rooms that are behind the receptionist area or the entry lobby area.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
It did.
Okay.
It did. And like I said, customer service is huge. That's a big thing for us, but it's a big price tag, and we've got to figure the funding and our priorities. So, anyway.
Mayor Mize?
Yes.
I did have one question. Continuing off of Councilmember Bellinger's question about where the money would be coming from, and you saying that there were several options. I would like to hear a little bit more about the CARES Act funding that you mentioned for social distancing measures. Is that money, first of all, can you give me an idea of how much that is? And secondly, is that money like use it or lose it money?
Great question. No, it's not use it or lose it. The city was able to get reimbursed for many of the expenses for our public safety expenses that were used during the early days of the pandemic. So we were able to get reimbursed by $1.8 million worth of payroll expenses. With that, if you recall, with some of those monies, we were able to also purchase a second set of bunker gear for our firefighter paramedics, and some other computers, and we also utilized those monies through NETCO for the PPP? The CARES Act grants that were provided to nonprofits and small businesses. So those were able to be used, and so give or take approximately, when it's all netted, there's about $1,050,000 that's left from that process. So it's in city's fund balance. It's available. It's available for use, but it doesn't have to be used for that. It's available for the city to use how you see fit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Is there a way with very, very little cost that we can improve the entryways? It's something to think about. I'm not talking about construction or anything, but even just have a little bit better signage and a phone number people could call, and I would be interested in that. And I think there's some volunteers who might give us some ideas too. That's just my 2 cents worth. I really do like better customer service, but possibly not $1 million. for it, but
Okay, anybody? Everybody good? Mr. Bartlett?
Evening, Mayor and Council. Steve Bartlett, Director of Public Works. Real quick, I wanted to answer, I guess, or extend an answer that Army gave you earlier. Virtually every industry in town has a secured entryway. I think I went to Eaton last week to meet with them, and you have to be double swiped, I think, to get in. And so virtually every industry has that now. So the security's become a big issue, and there's a lot of businesses like that. So one comment that I wanted to share as well, with conference rooms here, would or could change the use of conference room space that we already have in this building. So we could repurpose at least some of that space to be future offices or other productive spaces for us. So I think creating those here probably gives us some flexibility of growth in this building. Don't know how to quantify that other than to tell you I think some of that space is just available. And lastly, I tell you, a lot of departments, engineering is a good example, no longer has an administrative person that would greet and let people in. And so one thing we've all wished that we had is somebody that could take deliveries of things and greet or take messages. And so this would help us, I think, with a central single person to accomplish what we really were trying to accomplish with multiple staff members. So I think there's some efficiencies and some economies in that. Again, hard to quantify, but it's a reality. If you come up and see Case and I or whatever, you just get to walk in. And so I think this would benefit us to have that and be able to come down here and meet with folks. So what I really wanted to talk to you about as we concluded was if we're going to be in this building in long term, if this is a long-term solution for us, then I think it's time for us to consider what improvements we have to have for the future. Because at some point, those improvements become a reality, like Army touched on. Is that today? Is it tomorrow? Timeframes are always a part of that discussion, but I think we're at the threshold where we do have to consider if this is going to be our place, then how do we bring it in to the current time and the current level of service that we need? So please consider that. What we're really looking from you guys tonight is not to authorize anything, but some direction. We'd like to know, do you want to develop this a little further? This was not 30,000, this was 50,000 feet. This was our Crayola version, and I think you guys, Army did a very good job of taking a picture in the constraints of this building and coming up with something that was great and surprising to Keith and Mario and I. So do you want to drop down to 30,000 and develop this a little? Because portion of this was security related, and as Army touched on, we haven't addressed that in the other entrance, the rear of the building where the water office is. So that would need this level of schematic to see how those two could dovetail to truly secure the building, if that's going to be one of our priorities. So we did not task Army with that, other than just discussions that we had. So that would be another component that we could ask him to help us at least look at least down to this level. You could also revise this idea. So you may say, gee, we think having a council chambers conference room and then 4 meetings room is not what we want, and we could send Army back to the 50,000 foot level again with a different Crayola. So those are things that you could guide us on too. And honestly, it could be just hold here right now. This is not the timing for us. We've done it. We see where it is. And let's just think about it again in a year or two or 6 months. So that's kind of where we are. But staff needs some input from you, whether you want us to move down this road any further, and just kind of what we want to approve and what we want to look at. So be happy to answer any questions you have. So.
Mr. Anderson?
My personal perspective is that this project is something that is well worth taking a closer look at, sort of honing in on funding possibilities, making sure that it's not taking away from other higher priority issues. I know your department has all kinds of priorities, potentially above this, but I also believe that the customer service aspect, the ease of navigation aspect, for a whole lot of reasons, the security aspect is one that 20 years ago, 21 years ago, no one thought about. Now we think about it very differently. We should think about it very differently, in my opinion. So I think further exploration is something that's very warranted, and that's my view on it.
Mr. Bowman?
Thank you, Mayor. I do believe security should be a high priority in this building. Like I said, a lack of security. That should be our #1 priority in this building. and then we will work towards space. And you did mention space. Is there empty office space, unused space in this building as it stands today on different floors?
There's a few scattered, unused spaces. Some of them are positions that aren't currently filled space, and some of them are certainly are available, not to a large number, Councilman, yes.
And the reason why I was asking that question is possibly moving HR to a different floor and using that as a conference room, meeting room. But we definitely should place building security as a high priority.
And Councilman, in this particular scenario, we are displacing HR. So they will have to move into probably Mario's office, I think, just and live with him. So no, we haven't solved that. Again, we were at this level, and we know we're displacing him, and where we put him will eat up some of that available space that we have. So.
Thank you.
Ms. Bellinger?
I'm all for security, don't get me wrong. Just because we didn't have it back then doesn't mean we don't need it now. I would like to see much less expensive alternatives without, I mean, right now, I'd like to see some alternatives that would help with security and customer service, but wouldn't necessarily mean a $1 million price tag, unless we have it. But so far, I've been, you have to remember, I got a tour from every department, and every department was showing me their wish list, including, you know, fire trucks with bigger ladders, and I mean, so I've heard quite a bit about all our needs. So, and until we can prioritize this, I wouldn't want to get way far down the line, you know, with spending $1 million, but I would be interested in security and customer service.
Well, let me suggest we could task Army, and this has been a very inexpensive job for Army to do for us, and so understand where our investment is small. And I think for a little more investment, we could get Army to look at security in the back and look at a security version up here and just kind of give us some comparatives on that, if you'd like to do that. Again, we're here at your pleasure, and tell us what you want to do next, including do nothing. So that's kind of what we're asking from you.
But the sad thing about it is sometimes we look at security after the fact, so I surely do not want to be in that position. But
Well, I will say we have had at least one arrest, haven't we, on the second floor, I think. So yes, and so doesn't happen every day. We keep Mr. Bolden kind of away sometimes, but that hadn't happened every
Always
day.
trying.
I know he sneaks in, so so it's not every day. We're not telling you that, but the reality is we are totally exposed.
Anything else?
no, thank you.
Ms. Fisher?
Mr. Bartlett, hey, where are you going? You were saying the question and the direction that you guys want from council is whether to go from the 50,000 look to the 30,000, and then you touched a little bit also on the investment by the city so far being relatively small. What is the additional cost to do that $30,000 look?
Well, we haven't negotiated that with Army, so I would have to get with him, quite honestly, and give that to you. So I'm not prepared to answer that. I apologize.
That's okay. I forgive you. My concern is similar to Councilmember Bellinger's in terms of priorities, and so in that sense, I of course agree with the security aspect that multiple people have mentioned, but in order, I guess, for me to be able to answer that question adequately about what steps to take next, I would need to understand what other capital improvement projects we're looking at. I would also like to see whether a significant portion of the funding can be covered through grants or things not out of our own pocket that could be used for things like road improvements and things like that. And so that's probably not very helpful, but what I'm trying to say is that I feel like I am not informed enough to make the call on whether this is worth moving forward and giving a more closer look, given the fact that we don't know how much the city's investment would be to take a closer look, and given the fact that we don't really have a a big picture view of other capital improvements so far and funding sources.
Okay, thank you. So does that give you some ideas? That sounds to me like maybe other security measures, potentially, if there's other options that we could possibly look at. Certainly, I think that this is a possibility, but I'm a little like Ms. Fisher's. I'd like to see what other priorities we have to make sure that, so I can figure out where this one fits in.
So would it be reasonable maybe to let us spend just a few $1,000s to develop this, to get a little more costing detail out of it, and with Army, in other words, and develop the rear area, and then come to you with what fee structures would be to fully develop this into plans, and maybe some other comparative capital improvement items, so then you could compare it. Right now, Army's done a very high level, and cost estimate's probably a fuzzy word for it, Army. So he's tried to throw some dollars, so you had some metric for, is this 100,000 or it's $1 million? And the answer, it's $1 million. So, I mean, I'm not sure we can help you make a decision until we get just a little bit more polish on this. I mean, the point of coming here was to say, do you even want to look at that polish? But I think we need to spend a little more time to get you to that step, including fees and priorities. So,
You had mentioned some other potential security measures that may not be just this.
yes.
Maybe something short of this.
Well, I think we have other entry points that need to be coordinated. If we're going to call this secured and you can walk in the back door, then we haven't done anything. So I'm saying we did not task Army with looking at that. It was just discussion. So we wanted to come to you today and say, do you want us to continue looking into this at this level? And that's really what I meant by that comment, that we just have not finished. Is every door secure right now? No, not under this plan.
I'm not sure. You're suggesting we look at the $1 million and go in more depth and more detail with that. And I think there are two alternatives here. One is the $1 million going more depth, and the other is going in a little in more depth with something maybe a little more immediate and smaller that has security and customer service.
So one option would be to have some form of entry, and secured entry, maybe manned, and then to deal with the back, and then not necessarily rebuild a council chamber option this large. I don't know what I'm saying because we haven't Crayolaed that out. But one option would be to have maybe a greeting security area on both ends, and then to look at costing that out. And that's, again, that you can direct us to go take a peek at that and come back to you at that point in time. And that would be a security improvement, or maybe a reception area security improvement combination. Just an idea.
Yeah, hopefully we can do both. We could do secure and we could do.
Well, and I think they kind of go together in a
customer
way,
service.
quite honestly. So I think they go together. In other words, the public needs to come into this building, and if it's secured, that's a very unwelcoming and unfriendly way to do it. And so I'm saying if we secure the workspaces for us, then we're going to have somebody that greets and helps us manage ingress and egress to the building. And I think those go together.
Mr. Anderson?
And one point I want to make in thinking about all this, we need to consider the fact that Roy and I have been sitting up here a number of times in the last 3 years since I started, and having to watch people come shuffle in and out. One group comes in, another group goes out, because there is not enough space for all of the people who want to be participating in the meeting to be in here. And that's a big part of my concern, is that we just don't have enough space a lot of times to accommodate the number of people that want to participate in these meetings.
That's correct.
Transparency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
That's
Mr.
a
Anderson,
big
with a
part of it to
plan
me.
similar to this, there's not only that space, what did you say, Army, 115 or so, normal seating, I think? 120 normal seating. There's also overflow space that would have a multimedia ability for them to participate in meetings. So we could actually accommodate significantly larger volumes, even in an overflow
To
condition.
me, that's
Right now, they
that's a
overflow
big part
outside
of
on
it
the
to me,
sidewalk.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I may, it just sounds like, because, and again, we can go whichever direction, but it sounds like what you're asking, at least sort of the consensus, is allow staff to sharpen its pencil, work a little bit with Army on what some alternatives are. Just like Steve mentioned, if part of the effort is security, which it is, I mean, that's first and foremost, and then the customer experience certainly. But if there's opportunities where certain areas on the various floors could be secured, but we can also allow for entry points for the public to get in and be greeted and be directed appropriately, let us look at that. But it is gonna take a little bit of an investment to sit down with certain folks like Steve, with the fire chief, from a standpoint of just from a fire marshal's perspective, and then ultimately with Army, who's an architect, who can kind of help us based on his experience in other buildings. I mean, you basically have two main entrances to this building. Well, I guess three. One right there, one right next to it, and it leads you right into the stairwell, and then one over there on the backside, which typically in most buildings, that would be your staff entrance, but that is where people go pay their water bills. And so people can just freely go up without anybody ever seeing anybody. And so it's just, again, this door is always locked with the exception of Tuesdays. And you can leave, but you can't go back in. And then again, that door right next to it. So it's just, it's open all the time, except, except for before 8 a.m. and after 5. And so, I mean, we can certainly look at that, look a little bit further into it. We were looking at it from the standpoint, if we're gonna do the whole first floor, or at least a good portion of the first floor. But if there's no appetite for that because of cost, let us look further into some alternative means, see how it can be done.
I don't know that there's no appetite for it because of cost. I just think that we are aware of other priorities that you will be presenting to us in the coming meetings, and I just think we kind of want to understand more of them.
And that's why I'm saying, because there are other things that may take precedent in the cost, let us look at those alternatives so you at least have something to compare with. The plan you have tonight, which again is very just 50,000 foot view, but another 50,000 foot view of something less expensive, and see if that even meets a priority for you all, and when you compare all the other projects that are going to be coming before you, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Yeah.
That work?
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank y'all. Appreciate it. All right. So do we break before we can, huh? Okay. Okay, we will move on now to our open forum. Don't think that we have anybody? No, sir. Okay. Nothing there. So we'll move on to number 5, items to be removed from the consent agenda. Anything council wants to remove, or? Ms. Fisher, you good? Okay. All right. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve a consent agenda.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Second. All right. Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move on to number 7, the regular agenda. Consider appointment of Mayor Pro Tem and Vice Mayor Pro Tem by me. So I had a little bit of time to think about that. I certainly want each of the council persons to be involved in different things, and I think there'll be more and more things coming on where we can participate. Mr. Bolden has served in the past as the Mayor Pro Tem, and I would like for him to continue in that position, and he has agreed to. And then I have asked Ms. Fisher to serve as the Vice Mayor Pro Tem, and she has agreed to do that as well. So is that a motion that I make, or? Okay, so I would make a motion to that effect.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Bellinger. Any discussion? All right, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, moving on to B, consider approval of a contract by and between the City of Nacogdoches and National Industrial Maintenance, Inc. for the 2021 street crack seal project in a not-to-exceed amount of $239,860 by Assistant Director of Public Works. Mr. Opperman.
Yes, sir, Mayor, City Council. Good evening. Just bear with me real quick while I get this up. Case Opperman, Assistant Director of Public Works. We are bringing you a contract to consider this evening for approval on our 2021 street crack seal project. If you'll remember, a couple of months ago, we came to you discussing our paving priorities for this year. I know we have a couple of new council members, but this is the first of two projects that were part of our paving priorities for the coming year. On May 20th, we received 4 bids for the street crack seal project. 3 of those contractors, we were pleased to see, are contractors we haven't seen before. So that means that word was out a little bit on our project, and so hopefully we can garner some more interest in the coming years from companies that we haven't dealt with before. But the low bidder was one of these companies. They are called National Industrial Maintenance. The low bid for this work was in the amount of $239,860. We did a little bit of calling to their references just to check on them. They are apparently very capable of this kind of work. Even though we haven't dealt with them before, we feel comfortable taking the recommendations from the people we talked to. This project, just as a little recap, will include routing out and sealing of cracks on 32 streets throughout the city. This will be in advance of the seal coat project, which we discussed, which will provide a new sealed driving surface on these streets if it'll ever quit raining. But we would like to recommend the low bid for this project be awarded to National Industrial Maintenance at this time in the amount of $239,860, and this would be funded by the street maintenance fee. So after public comment, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just 1 minute, though. It's showing 265,960.
But that is what it's-
You're correct, sir. That is that's a typo, so I apologize for that. I'm not sure how that wound up on there. $239,860 is the bid, so I apologize for that confusion.
239.
239,860.
Okay, thank you.
I must have fat fingered that one, so I apologize.
Okay, public comment? Anyone to speak? All right, seeing none, then we'd move to council. Where do I, Mr. Bolden?
Thank you, Mayor. What is how long do the cracks seal? Is there a time frame that, how many years we think that would last in our environment?
Just the crack seal itself?
Yeah, just the crack seal.
Just offhand, I don't have a specific number for you, but I would assume, you could get 10 years out of it at least.
Years.
And that's without putting any surface back on top of it.
Oh, that begs the question. There was a statement in there that says precedes seal coating of streets.
Yes,
What
sir.
does that actually mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
You'll probably remember that we talked a little bit about routing out, getting all the debris out of these
Oh,
cracks
yeah,
first.
Okay.
And with this project, and then coming back with an oil and rock layer on top as a separate project. We split them up because you kind of need a few weeks of setup time on these crack sealed streets before you come in with a seal coat on top of it. So we found the best way to make that happen is to actually separate them out. And we had success with that in 2018 when we did it that way. So seal coat would come. Actually, we're opening bids on that Thursday, so we'll be coming to you in a couple of weeks with that one. But a couple of weeks separation on the two projects.
What type of herbicides you use?
Well, it depends on what they provide. It's it's kind of a Roundup type.
That's just for weeds and grass?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, you spray it and, and then you route it out and take all the dead stuff
Okay, you
with it.
spray it prior to that? Oh,
Yes, sir.
okay. Thank you very much.
Ms. Bellinger?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
None for me.
Ms. Fisher?
None for me either. Thank you, Case.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
The move, Ms. Bellinger.
Yeah, I'll second.
Second, Mr. Anderson. Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, receive a report on the after-action review of Winter Storm Uri and 2021 hurricane season and provide feedback and guidance. Fire Department Chief, I'm sorry, Division Chief.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Self.
I apologize. I have a slide presentation to. Is this? Mayor, council members, thank y'all for allowing me to come speak this evening. My name is Michael Self, Division Chief in the Fire Department, and I also serve as the city's Emergency Management Coordinator. I'd just like to visit with you for a few minutes tonight, reporting about the response that we had back in February to Winter Storm Uri, seeking guidance from council, and also kind of updating the preparations that have been made for the upcoming hurricane season. Okay, there we go. Winter timeline, I just want to look at some things that took place. Okay. With Winter Storm Uri, looking at the timeline that took place, preparations began almost a week before the storm actually hit. Chief Kiplinger updated the executive staff on Tuesday, February 9th, and preparations began being made the week before the storm for sheltering operations, for warming shelters should that need arise during the storm, which it did here in our city. Also on Saturday, February 13th, Mayor Brophy gave a disaster declaration, and that was declared. And just kind of adding in that what I'm speaking on tonight, we ran a joint effort with the county. I know Judge Sowell declared an emergency on that same time as Mayor Brophy. All I'm basically reporting on tonight is the city's responses. Does not include the partnership that we had with the county per se. On Sunday, February 14th, we had an emergency operations meeting, and then also opened a virtual EOC at that time. On Monday morning, we opened the actual EOC at the police station, and on Sunday night into Monday, we received our first 8 inches of snow, as you recall. Something that we had never in my life believed that we would ever see here in Nacogdoches was 8 inches of snow. Also on Monday morning before noon, we began experiencing issues with the water plant that was caused by the rolling blackouts that folks were experiencing during that time. On Tuesday into Wednesday, we received our next round of winter weather, and the ice accumulation that took place during that time really began the power outages and the problems that we had. And even into Tuesday, we began having fuel shortages where a lot of the local filling stations were running low on fuel, and so that problem began. On the next slide, on Wednesday, after all the accumulation of the precipitation had taken place, that Wednesday was the day that we had the majority or the largest number of emergency calls on that day. According to the report from the dispatch center, they had 3 times the number of calls on that day that they normally experience on that Wednesday. On Thursday, we had placed a request earlier in the week for a TIFMAS tender when we knew that there were water problems, and TIFMAS is the Texas Interstate Fire Mutual Aid System. In order to supplement the fire department, we had called for a tender, which is a truck that carried 3,000 gallons of water to respond, and it actually arrived on Thursday. And also we called in an ambulance strike team to assist Nacogdoches County EMS during this. And so by Thursday, after the storm had blown through, water distribution began to critical facilities. And what this means is we were able to get a small amount of water, bottled water, and get them to all the nursing homes and the hospitals here in town. And so those were the critical facilities that we were able to reach. On Friday, the EMS strike team actually arrived, and also a state sheltering team to assist. The majority of sheltering that took place during the storm was through a partnership that we had with Godtel. Both the city did open the rec center for a warming shelter, and also the county did utilize the civic center for a sheltering operation also there. On Saturday, after the storm had blown through, the damage assessment tool was released to the public, and on that Saturday, as things were beginning to thaw out, the inspections department for the city was opened to where folks could begin to come in and get permits for the work that was needed to be done because of the damages that had been incurred by the storm. On the Monday after the storm, city facilities were once again reopened, and on Tuesday, the ambulance strike team and sheltering team were released by the Emergency Operations Center. And on Wednesday, the week after the storm, on that Wednesday was the last press release from the city regarding the storm. As far as the after-action review, what we did a couple of weeks after the storm had taken place, we called a meeting of all kind of department heads and those that were on the emergency operations team, and we met and discussed and had a review, basically a step-by-step timeline of what had taken place, and also looking at what happened, things that we could have looked at and possibly improved upon, and what things needed no improvement. The next few things we'll kind of look at are kind of broke down into 3 things: the challenge that we faced during the storm, the solutions that committee basically found that they felt would fix that, and then also reporting to you tonight the progress that's been made since that time. We've also had 2 other meetings beside the after-action review to bring in our partners from Memorial Hospital, Medical Center Hospital, Stephen F. Austin State University, and NISD were invited into those meetings. And we've also met with the county's emergency management personnel and Judge Sal to get their feedback in on this also. Communications. The challenge that we faced during the storm was the fact that there was no electricity. Therefore, there was no television, no radios. As folks' phones began to die, reaching folks through social media and such, our normal means of communications were basically wiped out by this storm. Some of the other challenges that we've also had is being able to better communicate with those who speak other languages outside of English. And so those are challenges that we face that we're looking at in the future. One of the things that we want to do is to have a communications plan for not only the employees of the city to know from day to day if the city is going to be open, when it's going to be reopened, which essential employees need to report, but also an external communication plan to where we have a broad-based way of reaching all those within the city and all of our citizens. The progress that has been made is we are preparing to launch a revised mass communication system, which will be a system to where folks will have their home phones and their cell phones registered to where we can send out a mass message to everybody that is registered on that. Part of that is if there's a fuel leak of some sort that we need to evacuate an area, we can go on the map and pinpoint, just say if we're supposed to evacuate half a mile from that leak, we can circle that, and everybody whose phone is registered within that half mile will receive the message at one time. And so we're looking at a new mass communication system. We have developed a plan utilizing more public information officers, And we've also begun meetings, as it says there. We have met with other emergency management partners, with the American Red Cross, kind of reestablishing our relationship with them, and also with the 21/7 group, and really reaching out before the next storm takes place. And we have a communication plan in place. Another challenge that we face is fuel for city response. And so we really want to create a fueling plan, because what we found out during this storm is both the city and the county and other major entities also all use the same fueling company here in town. And so we're looking at a way that we can take care of that to where everybody's not going to the same place. We had a great relationship with NISD. When fuel became short, we were able to fuel ambulances and fire trucks at the NISD bus station during the storm. So the partnerships that were established with that were great, and we're looking to further those in case we need them in future times. Kind of the progress that's being made, the plan is under development at this time for our fueling, and also looking at ways in which we can create redundancy in the fueling. One of the challenges that we faced was having a ready-to-go emergency management team for this. Due to retirements, folks taking different positions within the city, we kind of pulled together a team to manage this event. We had a great staff that worked together, folks that had an interest in areas but necessarily not experience in running an emergency from different management positions, came together and did a great job. Everybody worked well together. Some of the solutions that we're looking at with the emergency management team is providing additional training for those, and through managers and directors in the city, finding folks that we can find to plug in to those positions. We have filled all the command roles. We have found some training provided by the state of Texas, and we are offering that to employees over this summer and into the fall to get them position-specific training for the roles in emergency management. And we're still working to try to find a backup for every single role. That is our goal with that, is to have a person ready to go and then also a backup should that person not be able to fulfill their roles for other reasons. The next thing that we found was infrastructure challenges. And what we're looking at is a review of all critical infrastructure and equipment, and we're developing a plan to harden critical infrastructure within the city. This review is currently taking place through the engineering department, and we are identifying grants that have become available both at the state and the federal level to where we can get grants to assist with that would be most likely at no cost to the city. One of the other key things we found is the education of critical partners. Some of the challenges that we are experiencing with that during the storm is generators and other critical infrastructure at nursing homes and hospitals that had issues. And so what we're going to do is, part of our emergency management team is going to educate those facilities, making sure as we're going into hurricane season now that the maintenance on their generators is up to date, that they understand what is needed to take care of them, the fueling that's needed, and all the maintenance that is needed to keep their infrastructure capable to respond. Before the end of July, emergency management team members will have gone by and visited with the hospitals and all the nursing homes and assisted living places here in town to make sure that they know that. The other thing that we found was pre-staged resources to where we could take care of city staff. During the storm, at most times during that week, we had 2/3 of the fire department on duty at all times, along with street department staff that came and were here for days. And so we find that it's very important as a city and as an emergency management team to actually take care of them, to make sure that they have water to drink, that they have food to be fed, and keep their energy up for the work that's being done. What we thought that we needed to do is to stage resources for use during an emergency. This has actually been taken care of. We have enough water stored at the Public Works facility to, I believe, last roughly about 4 to 5 days, taking care of city employees, and we also have some military-style ready-to-eat meals that are there for city staff, and also cots that have already been pre-staged and are ready to take care. And I stress that this is just for city staff, which leads into kind of preparing for everyone else and looking at home preparedness. And we encourage the citizens to basically prepare for themselves, just due to the fact that if we have a major emergency, we need them to be able to take care of themselves for possibly up to 3 days in case it's so bad that we can't reach them. We have limited resources within the city, and so God forbid, say a tornado rolls through all of the city, north to south, there may be a couple of days before we're able to get to everybody's house to check on everyone, because we're going to have to triage who we go to, and certainly the nursing homes and the hospitals and mass care facilities will be who we reach out to first to make sure that they're okay. What we encourage citizens to do is to monitor news outlets and social media, because what part of our communications plan is we will be reaching out to the newspaper, we'll be reaching out to television outlets, and also communicating on social media, which is like just weird to me because I'm just like read the newspaper and TV. I've had to learn to branch out that folks really communicate a lot by social media. And even if folks would look at the www.ready.gov, which is a FEMA website that tells preparedness steps that they can take for all kinds of natural disasters. And we encourage folks to be prepared for 3 to 5 days of self-sufficiency and to prepare an emergency supply kit. The next slide actually tells some things that are kind of cheap and easy that folks can keep up with. Getting some batteries to where if they have a radio, that it can power the radio, and also making sure that electronic devices are fully charged and ready to go. That people store water. According to the FEMA website, they suggest 1 gallon of water per person per day for an emergency. We also encourage them to get non-perishable foods, and I found it's kind of entertaining that FEMA has to remind folks to get a regular hand crank device to open cans should they lose power and can't use their electric can opener. Also personal hygiene items, which includes like wipes and such, especially during the time that we're still dealing with COVID, to have like some antibacterial wipes and such in that. Have flashlights available, and also minor first aid items. And we encourage folks to kind of keep most of this kit kind of together year round, because we never know what might take place at any time. As I mentioned, the 2021 hurricane season actually begins today. And then there's the predictions for this season. Both the NOAA and Colorado State University, their numbers are there, which their prediction is generally around 15 is kind of the average named storms that they look to have this year. And we've already had 1 named storm in the Atlantic, so we're already kind of ahead of schedule, I guess you would say. Also, we're looking at roughly 6 to 10 hurricanes, and then average of 4 major storms. And the way that they've kind of looked at this is this going to be an active storm season likened to what we experienced in 2020. And the Weather Service began now, when they make predictions, they tell you how much confidence they have in their predictions. And they're basically saying that they have a 70% confidence in their predictions that this is going to be another active storm season. In August, NOAA will go back in August and kind of revise its predictions on what we look to experience. In the past here in Nacogdoches, most of the storms and such that we've had that have caused the most damage have came in September. But certainly at any time, this is possible. Some of the local planning that we're kind of looking at for hurricane season is communication with city staff and the emergency management team. We want to keep everybody ready to go, make sure they're trained, and keep them aware of what's coming. Communication with the residents. We're going to begin pushing this information out to the residents, letting them know that it is hurricane season, telling them ahead of time what they can prepare for, and have those home readiness kits ready to go. As I've already mentioned, that we're looking for training for the emergency management team, and we're really working on partnerships with local government entities. Working with the county as a joint emergency operations center was a great thing. We would like to see that continue in the future, and we will be working with our government partners, both with the county, with SFA and NISD, making sure they're prepared and everybody's playing with the same sheet of music for the upcoming season. Also, our partnership with the American Red Cross and helping with shelters and such. We've already been visiting with them, their representatives, and are preparing to work with them should sheltering be needed for this upcoming hurricane season. And also the volunteer organizations that help us out in many ways that we could not do what we do without the volunteer organizations taking care of things with us. Emergency preparedness, just looking to the future. Certainly I want to seek the guidance of council, and kind of the first thing I would say is, are there any questions that I could answer from the council?
Mr. Anderson?
No questions. I may have comments in a moment, but no questions at this point.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Self, for one, for that presentation, and two, for all of the work that you and our first responders and city staff, who usually isn't first responders, but sort of had to become that during the storm. Thank you so much for that, for what you did for the city. I was really glad to see a plan in place for addressing communication. I have two sort of sets of questions. My first has to do with something that I know nothing about, which is infrastructure. I don't remember exactly what you called it, but the infrastructure updating, sort of looking at what we have and what needs to be updated or anything like that. And my question is, someone who knows, who's much smarter than me and knows more about this than I do, mentioned to me in a conversation about the storm and the aftermath of it, something about a tripwire at the water plant, so that if there's another rolling blackout, it isn't affected. And I might be explaining this wrong, but it isn't affected. I mean, our whole water treatment plant doesn't go down because of that. Is there anything we could have done in terms of infrastructure equipment to have avoided our water plant going south?
You'll let him take it, won't you?
What? I'm not seeing what's happening. I'm not on the joke.
You ran him off, Miss Fisher, so you got Steve Bartlett, so.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. I'm well loved and I know it. Short answer to your question is, we were subject to whatever Encore or ERCOT did with the rolling blackouts. Now, we have been working, in fact, we visited with Senator Nichols, and we have been working with Encore in order to try to get certain designated facilities named as areas that are critical. And that would include hospitals as well as water plants, so that we wouldn't be part of a rolling blackout. That wasn't the only problem that we had, and we recognize that. So we've worked to try to harden some of those other problems that may include having duplicity of parts, which was a big deal for us. We didn't have duplicate parts on hand. Had to go to Houston to get them, and we couldn't go to Houston. Having generators tested under load as opposed to just being tested unloaded, and things that were some of the failure mechanisms that we found. So it's a multi-fingered answer to your question, but there's nothing that we could have done at the time to have avoided it. We were kind of subject to the conditions, but I think that we can at least have a better armament for avoiding some of that, at least in the future. Does that answer your question?
It does, Mr. Bartlett. Thank you.
Steve,
But wait.
can you also mention too that the plant is monitored 24/7, so there's someone present?
Yes, so, thank you. And the plant's occupied and monitored 24 hours a day. So we have operators on staff, albeit our night crew is shallow and it's just monitoring, but somebody is there all the time. So we know immediately when this happens, which is why I got calls at 3 a.m, I promise you. So, but it is being monitored.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bartlett. And then this question may be for Mr. Self, or you can stay there, I don't mind, but it's in relation to the part of the presentation where you were discussing communicating to families, basically to residents, like you have to be prepared to take care of yourself for 3 to 5 days, and these are all the ways to do it. Something that I would be interested in us looking into, because I mean, for me, when the storm hit and I knew that it was coming, and my family was not nearly as well prepared as it should have been, and I was informed, and I also am very fortunate to have the resources to have been able to prepare myself for 3 to 5 days to feed my family and to have flashlights and all of that. There are many in our community who are focusing on feeding their kids from one day to the next, and the idea of having 5 days of food on hand and electronic chargers is not within reach economically. And so something that I would be interested in us looking into is whether there are some sort of emergency preparedness grants that maybe the city could obtain to put together these emergency kits and to provide the resources for families in our communities that just simply, as much as you tell them you should be ready to be able to feed yourself and give yourself water for 3 to 5 days, as much as you tell them that, they just might not have the resources to do it.
We will certainly look into that and see if grants are available. The scope of Winter Storm Uri was so great. What we are used to doing, that if we have a hurricane that affects Nacogdoches County, what we do is then contact the state and say, look, we have water issues. We need to set up points of distribution for water to our residents. And normally the state then supplies water to us. We set up, we distribute that. And the scope of this storm was so great, affecting the entire state. We were told pretty early on in the week that a lot of help was not coming. And so there was discussion during the storm of how can we do this? How can we get water out to citizens? And there was no water to be had. And what little we were able to obtain from local vendors, that's why we made the choice to make sure that the nursing homes and the hospitals had that. But we will certainly, this was a different storm than what we normally deal with, but I will certainly look into grants to see what we can do to assist with putting emergency home kits together for local residents.
I appreciate you and everything you do. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Bolden?
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation, a lot of information that's valuable. On the communication issue, and speaking on what Ms. Fisher stated about taking care of yourself, and I like that you're starting out before a storm is even predicted, and maybe if a hurricane is coming this way, there'd be a lot of things already in place that a citizen should have, and we should communicate now their needs, emergency kits or whatever, and then we also should reinforce that prior to a storm coming in, and then we should communicate to them afterward to see if they need any help. But thank you, it was a great presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Bellinger?
I also have 2 sets of questions. To what extent did we use volunteers? And I don't mean city staff who were volunteering, I mean just volunteers this time around.
One of the greatest assets that took place was the local Jeep Club. Because of the roadways and such were very treacherous, and we're telling folks don't get out and drive. The Jeep Club actually kind of planned and got dialysis patients from their homes to the dialysis clinics for needed dialysis. A lot of folks volunteered and took care of neighbors. At one point, we communicated as best we could to tell folks, go check on elderly neighbors. Make sure if you've got, just say, a gas stove and you're able to cook, your neighbor next door may be all electric and cannot cook, carry warm food to your neighbors. If you have extra blankets, carry them to your neighbors. And so a lot of clubs and such did that. Church groups really stepped up during the storm and went out and checked on elderly neighbors and those that they knew that had special needs.
So the reason I ask that is because I was very involved with Hurricanes Katrina and Rita when they came in, and I would say, I shouldn't even make this guess, but maybe 50 to 75% of the work that was done by volunteers, but it was well-organized volunteers, and at the time, the Red Cross was very different than the Red Cross is now. So to me, there's a huge group of people, not necessarily in these nonprofit organizations, but a huge group of people who want to and are very, very capable of helping out, even helping to get messages and helping take care of their neighborhoods. In fact, Strong Towns and a lot of other engaged communities have that volunteer base in place. So, do we have any plans for beyond just, like Love Inc. or the Jeep Group? I think they're great, and churches to actually have a more trained volunteer group. Or would you suggest they go through Red Cross or? Let me follow up with that. Like in the shelters, like the churches took in many people. I know you're trying to stay away from just moving them out of their homes, but the churches took in, and it was all volunteers who did all the feeding. Some of them took all the food out of their freezer. I mean, it was run by organized volunteers who were trained at the leadership level, but they could engage and show people what to do.
I would encourage folks at whatever area they're interested in. I would hesitate to push everyone to the American Red Cross. It's a wonderful organization. Folks that want to help with sheltering, help with some of the efforts that the American Red Cross partake in, certainly I encourage folks to go that direction. But if a person doesn't have an interest in participating with them, finding a local group and participating with them. We actually, within our command chain, do have a position that is specifically working with volunteer organizations, because what we don't want to take place is have city staff working towards taking care of some needs, and out here we have a volunteer organization that's also taking care of those same needs, and you have this duplication of effort where we could utilize it better and reach more people. And so that's why we have that position within our chain of command that will actually work with them and help coordinate those needs with them, and be where all volunteer organizations can contact one person with the city and have that person that's right there and has the ear of the incident commander.
I may visit in more depth, with some other suggestions so that right now people can figure out how to get trained and get prepared and know what they would do without having to be a member of a church or whatever. There might be some other ways to, and I have another set of questions, but I'll be quiet for a minute.
Now, I would ask, is there guidance that you could provide to us regarding emergency response to any past events that we've had, things that you would like to see us engage in, maybe that we have not engaged in the past, or just the guidance from the council?
I can, from this storm, like you say, it was a statewide event. So not having maybe the Red Cross or some of those participate, I can understand that. Do you think we'll face that in hurricane season if we have a storm that comes up? You think the Red Cross will be responsive this year, just from your experience in talking to them since the winter storm?
Yes, I mean, we have a great working relationship with the American Red Cross. And I mean, I've spoken just this last week with the director for the East Texas area, and they are very interested in helping out. And they are prepared, if we do sheltering operations, to come in and take care of the shelters and us just provide logistical support to them. And so should we have need for sheltering in the upcoming storm season, I can, from the conversations that I've had, the American Red Cross is ready to step in and help us.
Anybody else?
I mean, I would just sort of follow up on what Councilmember Bellinger mentioned. I would maybe suggest possibly looking into doing some public workshops. to not only give potential volunteers, people who want to help in situations like that, information about what they can do, what they shouldn't do, who to contact, all of sort of the breadth of that information, and where they can get resources when those incidents happen. You know, the winter storm was an unusual one, as you mentioned, that you know, even a hurricane is a lot more localized. And you have a lot more availability of resources and manpower and so forth. After that sort of event, the winter storm was unprecedented, to say the least. And you know, there's a decent chance that extreme weather events will become more frequent, more extreme. So I appreciate Joel's response to what has happened and the proactive nature of what you're doing to look forward. Because you know, there's a decent chance that we'll have more of this to deal with. So
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I like the idea of what he mentioned about public workshops. Even setting up the emergency kits, if we could do that, because
yeah.
there's a lot of senior citizens out there, they're not into the media, and we need to, even like communication, you mentioned about registering phones. Is that cell phones and home phones?
I believe the current method that we have is basically landlines. And the method that we will be going to very shortly actually reaches cell phones.
Okay. Because, I mean, landlines, we can reach most all of the senior citizens, but there's a lot of homes that don't even have landlines anymore.
Right.
So, but thank you.
Okay.
Should I speak up again?
It's your
Sorry.
prerogative.
Well, what I'm talking, I think that would be a wonderful thing, these community information, and also in seeing who wants to be engaged and what their talents are and how they could be engaged, and maybe that would be under that position. And also reaching out and asking, particularly if we can identify people in neighborhoods who then can watch out for other people, but also in sheltering. To me, you might want to have a citizen task force that also maybe participates with your staff, not just the people in the organizations. But that brings me to my second issue, which is communications. And it is so hard now when, you know, the paper doesn't come out every day, the TV isn't as reliable as it was very hard to get information, and it's still hard to get information, and it's not your fault. I mean, and I know the city has a difficulty. I'm wondering what you would think about for this and for even ongoing communications, having another citizens task force so that their eyes outside to be able to recommend. And I spoke about this with a couple of people who are in public information, and they would be happy to serve on it as a volunteer and maybe, you know, do a little assessment and give some ideas. And that helps engage them. I'm looking at ways to save the city money while engaging people in doing the work that needs to be done because they want to be engaged.
Okay.
So both those, I think, a couple of, you know, task forces that could help and actually help in the emergencies also might be helpful. That's just.
Maybe give him those names.
Sure.
Okay, certainly.
And it's so hard when we have to rely on Facebook because Facebook is a private company.
Right.
And it just, and there's so many people not on Facebook, and particularly old folks like me, you know, and though I am on Facebook now. But there's a lot of people. Somehow we need to get into these neighborhoods. And I think the work 21/7 is doing about having neighborhood captains, maybe that might be a way to engage volunteers in these neighborhoods. That's just a little bit.
Yes, okay. Anything else? All right, thank you for the
All right,
report. We appreciate your work.
Thank you all for your time this evening.
Okay, we'll move to number 8, executive session. Deliberation regarding economic development, negotiations under Government Code Section 551.087. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.087, the council will go to executive session. Okay,
Hold
pursuant
everyone's attention.
to Texas Government Code Section 551.087, council has returned from executive session. It is 6:43 PM on June 1st, 2021. Okay. No, and no action taken, all right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, thanks.
Aren't you gonna pound that gavel?
Yeah, I didn't even do that to start with. You